Hi again, everyone. Rob here from the Way Out West Roots Music video channel. Today I get to interview Dom Turner. We're lucky that Dom's coming down Sunday, November the 6th with his new project, which is Dom Turner's Rural Blues Project. I got to see them up at Broadbeach and they were just fantastic. So make sure you get yourself a ticket so that you can have a great time. Also, I've been asked by a few of our viewers why I don't use the music of the person I'm interviewing. Pretty simple, really. YouTube have a very strict copyright policy. So if I use the music of the artist, even if I've got their verbal okay, I could still incur a copyright strike. The problem with that is if you get 3 strikes, you're off the air for good. So better to be safe than sorry. The music I used, I get from a royalty-free website. You have to pay a little bit for the particular track, but it saves getting into the naughty books with YouTube. So, sit back and enjoy Mr. Dom Turner as we talk about all sorts of things, including some great memories of Jessie May Hempel and Hound Dog Taylor. Bye for now. I wanted to go back right to early family life. Was music a big thing in your home? And if it was, how did you actually gravitate towards the blues?
Good question, Rob. Well, it wasn't a big thing in terms of people playing instruments. In saying that, though, my eldest brother is a guitar player, Keith Turner, and still plays to this day. He's more along the lines of a surf guitar music, instrumental surf guitar, great player. So that Keith was an influence, although he's a lot older than me. So he was out doing gigs while I was a kid, so there wasn't really that connection. But there was a guitar in the house, so that's and I used to sneak into his room and drag it out from under the bed and open the case up, and the smell of all the gigs used to come pouring out of this thing, so all of that I think has an effect, to be honest. In terms of listening, there was a lot of listening, not from my parents, but mainly from my brothers and sisters, who were mainly older. It's a big family, and there was a lot of things, like a lot of music, but the Rolling Stones, the Kinks, the Who, Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, the list goes, Donovan, the list goes on, so that you can get an idea of that was the era of that particular music. So how did I get into blues? Well, it was more the fact that I listened to all of that music, and then you'd gravitate towards certain sounds, because I think it's the sound thing that gets me with blues, sonically. And what I was hearing in the Rolling Stones was harmonica and slide guitar. I knew what harmonica was, and I didn't know what slide guitar was as a teenager, but that drew me in. And then I started poring over the LPs, the album covers, and then finding, hey, this particular song's written by McKinley Morganfield. Who's that? Oh, that's Muddy Waters. Okay. What's this guy all about? Then you find that. And then you never go back, It's just, I still listen to those other artists today and still really like many of them. But once I realized I was drawn to this sound, I just started searching for blues music. And I was a teenager when I did that. And probably the first albums I started to buy were Lead Belly, if I remember correctly, Lead Belly, followed by Mississippi Fred McDowell. And then it went on to Blind Blake, Blind Willie McTell, Blind Boy Fuller, particularly those kind of rural artists. That was what I kind of, Muddy Waters, of course, Howling Wolf, and it just went on and on from there. Yeah, well, actually, I don't know how I missed that name, Robert Johnson, because he was very early on. I heard about his records and that sort of thing. Obviously the Rolling Stones covered a number of his songs. Well, that's an interesting one. Robert Johnson was like a beacon almost, in that he was kind of, he was heavily influenced, as all artists are really, but he was heavily influenced by earlier artists, that were older than him. When he recorded, he was young. they were older than him. Artists like Charlie Patton, Skip James. Trying to think, there's another one I can't think of, but there
Robert
was
Lockwood.
Robert Lockwood, of course, yeah. There's another one whose name might escapes me, but you can hear him in a lot of his music. You can hear Skip James in his music a lot. In fact, he's actually versioned a number of Skip James songs, really, and he's taken it. So he was almost like pulling together and making a collage of all of these, they were contemporary to him, but they were older than him. I think that was one thing, is that he was able to draw all this music together and then put it out in his own fashion. Plus, he drew on the mystique of the devil, which is the whole kind of backsliding concept of you can't serve the devil and the Lord, you can't play blues and be religious because, it's a religious community. So he took that, but he wasn't the first to do that, that was done by earlier artists as well that he was influenced by. But for some reason or other, and then you combine that with the fact that he died in mysterious circumstances.
Another great influence, and a guy I love, is Hound Dog Taylor, because his slide guitar playing, he was pretty rough and ready, and I don't think he was a great technician, but he sure know how to create a groove and have a good time, and that hill country blues is all about grooves too, isn't it?
Yeah, Hound Dog Taylor's a huge influence on me, actually. So he's coming from a later period, 60s and 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Died in the 70s. I can't remember what year. But Hound Dog Taylor is a great example of the fact that he's just, as you mentioned, he's not a great technician. And that's kind of, he's an absolute master, but it's a master of grit. It's a master of like the sonic world. He could create like a whole voodoo in his sound. He doesn't play a lot of notes, but it doesn't matter. They're going to be the best notes you're ever going to hear, I actually equate him to almost like a punk artist. In fact, he heavily influenced, artists like John Spencer, Blues Explosion, a lot of the post-punk things, Iggy Pop, all of those artists, because of the fact he just had this approach of like, he messed with the speakers in his amplifier reputedly, slit holes in them to make them sound distorted, and he just went for the throat, So I absolutely love his playing and his sound. And you're right, Rob, he draws on that hill country blues thing, which is a hypnotic concept of, the music is repetitive, and that's not in a bad way. It's hard to do that. It's hard to get things repetitive, and the modern day kind of hip hop and dance music, and that draws from the same idea of keeping a groove going, and keeping it repetitive, and people just get lost in it. Was when yes, it is. Yeah, it's a conscious thing to keep it fresh, but it's also to keep it enjoyable for me. I don't want to be doing the same thing over and over again. But also, I see, if you search on, I go, well, what's blues? Well, I see it as a sound, and we have a name for it. It comes from, it's an African American music form. I'm just versioning it and making my own thing up with it. But it's a sound. All of these slidey, bendy notes and pentatonic scale and, certain kind of vocal styles, that all makes blues. But it's not only in blues. It permeates a lot of what you refer to as vernacular music forms, like music of the people. It permeates that. So that's where the Asian thing, I traveled a lot in Southeast Asia and East Asia, and then you'll hear something, I'm in Vietnam and I hear this Kai Lung music, and all of a sudden, wow, what's this sound? It sounds like blues to me. It's not blues, but it's got elements of it. And so that's what, drags me into those various other music forms, on the streets of, I've spent quite a lot of time going back and forth to Vietnam. on the streets of Saigon, seeing what was a blind musician singing through a megaphone with an old Vietnamese-style electric guitar, which is has lots of bendy notes, through a little amp that was distorted and crazy and reverb all over it, walking down the street. It's like, this is like a Maxwell Street Markets blues singer from the 1970s or 60s. You know, it's the same deal going on here. These same notes, same more kind of almost moaning in the voice. It's blues. So so that's what draws it together for me. I kind of draw on these influences.
We're good mates with Pauline Bailey. She's wrote 3 fantastic books and interviews with blues artists. Just great. In your chapter, you talk about Jessie May Hemphill, and I'm sure a lot of the people maybe listening to this YouTube wouldn't be aware of Jessie's music. Can you tell us why our audience should be acquainted with our music?
Well, Jessie May Hemphill sadly passed on. I didn't ever get to meet her. I nearly did, because she was supposed to tour here with R.L. Burnside and Big Jack Johnson and Lonnie Pitchford and Frank Frost, and I was on that tour as a support artist, but I didn't get to meet her. But what's important about Jessie May is, and all the musicians from the hill country tradition, is that she's a fabulous exponent of that very primal, primitive nature of hill country blues. That's one thing. The other thing is, it's her family history. She's a Hemphill, and her grandfather is Sid Hemphill. So Sid Hemphill was recorded by Alan Lomax in the 50s, I think, 50s or 40s, a long time ago. I can't remember the exact date, but he was like the godfather of the hill country music. In that, he was one of the first musicians recorded there, a multi-instrumentalist. And when you listen to his music, it's more like country in a way. He plays quills, like that you blow into, and there's also violin features a lot in the music, or fiddle as it would be referred to. So it's more like a hillbilly sounding music form, but you can hear that it's got those. So she's the granddaughter of Sid Hemphill, which is very important in the tradition. So because in the hill country area, there's a lot of families, the Burnsides and the Kimbras, and the descendants sang. It's just marvelous.
We're going to talk shortly about the Rural Blues Project. But firstly, I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, how did Midnight Oil's Rob Hurst become a backslider?
Because we've been mates for many years. Like, we kind of go way back to, Rob's been in the band now over 20 years, but we kind of go back longer than that. I'm not sure how much further than that, but and it was because we're friends, and we've also admired each other's playing, and we have he's my musical brother. We have a real connection musically, but we weren't able to really draw on that for a long time. But when the original drummer from percussionist Peter Burgess decided to leave Backsliders, it was I happened to be talking to Rob on the phone about a completely different thing. He was just a friendly chat, and I said, as a by the way, that Pete had left the band, and there was a little bit of silence, and he went, "Have you asked anybody yet?" I said, "Well, I've been thinking of a few people." And he said, "Well, you haven't asked me," and I'm paraphrasing, but it's almost like exactly how the conversation went. And I said, well, because at that point, that was the year 2000, Midnight Oil was still very active. They were still playing then. And I said, well, I really didn't think this is going to work. What I didn't realize is that I think at that point, Midnight Oil were planning to wind down. I think they split up at that point around 2002. So I think Rob had more info than I did, obviously. and said, well, I think we can work this, we'll be able to schedule it. We don't have a lot of midnight oil stuff. If you want to do it, we'll work it. And so it went from there. We did have a audition, but it wasn't really an audition. But we kind of got into, we just better try it. Got into it, and it was Jim Conway at that time. He was still in the band playing harmonica. We went into a rehearsal studio and just did one song. I was like, yeah, okay. Well, I think what a lot of people don't realise is that Rob actually has a fairly strong jazz background, and he played in jazz bands in school. And he draws on that influence quite a lot in our playing. I mean, that may not be obvious at the outset. You just think of him as a loud raucous drummer, but he can be very delicate, and he uses this big dynamic. That's something we've always used in Backslider. Backslider's the dynamic of kind of going loud and dropping down. And Rob's a real master on that. So plus we just have a connection where we can get into a rehearsal studio and basically write up a bunch of songs very quickly because we play together and we connect, So that's great.
Yeah, sadly, our patron saint, Mr. Chris Wilson, as we know, passed away. He did our Christmas show every year in a row for 18 years. But I was reading up that you finished up on a recording at Live in the Basement with Chris's band. You virtually became a member of his band for the night. How did that go?
Yeah, that was a great night. That was, gee whiz, it must have been early 2000s, I think. And both my group at the time, Super, and Chris Wilson were booked to do a show at the Basement that was being recorded by the Basement for the Live at the Basement series. And so, yeah, both acts were being recorded. We did our set. We were on first. We did our set. That was recorded. And then Chris came on stage, and I think it was, my memory of it was at least in the first or second song. I was at the bar, and he just yelled out to me. He sort of said, "Hey, Dom, get up here." So I wasn't going to argue. And so, okay, because our gear was still set up. So I got up there to play on what I thought was one song, but it ended up, I played the whole set. And then that's what got recorded. That's what got released as the Live at the Basement, as part of the Live at the Basement series. So I still have people to this day say, "I didn't realise you were in Chris Wilson's band," Well, I wasn't. We did have another connection though, because in the 90s with Backsliders, Chris guested with us on a number of tours. It was the mid-90s, I think. And we did quite a number of Melbourne dates, Sydney dates, and we did a few festivals as well as the Backsliders with Chris Wilson. One of them's on the Recovery ABC TV program that you can still find on YouTube, which is a version of Smokestack Lightning, the Howling Wolf song that Chris sang. Well, we both sang it, actually. We took turns on but that was a wonderful experience to play with Chris, and it's just such a huge loss to the music community and just to the community at all, in general.
Yeah, I read that there was a time when you got to get up and play on stage with Derek Trucks. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. That was frightening, I tell you. That was at the Adelaide International Guitar Festival. I don't remember what year, maybe 2006, 2007, somewhere. It might be a bit later. And again, that was documented. The audio is up on YouTube. Sorry, it's not on YouTube. You can Google it. It's up there. There's an audio of the whole concert, which is really cool because, and someone's gone to the great lengths to break it down to songs. Anyway, so we were playing, as in Backsliders were playing the Adelaide Guitar Festival, and what I didn't realise, after us was Derek and his band, and after our set, Derek was on the side of the stage, and I didn't realise. And then the next morning, my wife and I came downstairs from our hotel room to head out for the day, and Derek was down in the foyer and staying in the hotel and had a bit of a chat. And he said, "What are you doing tonight?" I said, "Coming to see you." He said, "Well, why don't you come play with me?"
Wow.
So, okay, all right. But it's pretty, it's pretty frightening sort of thing to do. But I mean, I was incredibly excited and honoured, to be honest.
But that's a testament to your playing. He wouldn't invite just anyone up on stage.
Yeah, I mean, I was very honoured by it. In saying that again, I was talking about with Rob having a mutual connection, but although Derek plays in a different style to what I do in many respects, he also draws a lot on sacred steel music, and I have that connection with Nicky Brown with the sacred steel. This was before I'd met Nicky, though, actually, but I've always been interested in that kind of music. So I understand where he's coming from, and anyway, it did work. It was sometimes these. Well, I hesitate to sort of call it a collaboration, but sometimes these combinations don't work. I find I'm a bit critical on those sorts of things. I tend to be, but I felt it was really good. We connected with the band too. Great band. And okay, I'll start with the resonator guitar. The resonator guitar was important because musicians. It seems to me, anyway, from what research I've done on musicians that I know, tradition bearers from within music community, and I'm saying that because I'm very much from outside, looking in. Is that there's a lot of concern for it doesn't have to be a particular guitar. It's more about something making a sound. So there can be economic reasons why. People are getting cheaper guitars or whatever. Not always, when you Junior Kimbrough, for example, played, quite great Gibson guitars, but often it's what access people have to guitars, musicians have to instruments in general. For some reason or other, the resonator, because at the time when they were built, originally, they're still built today, but originally in the 20s and 30s, they were expensive comparatively. They were a very expensive item. But blues musicians seemed to get them. So that's got to tell you they must have been, because generally blues musicians would be coming from a poorer area in general. So they must have been able to get them. So they're drawn towards them. And one of the reasons is they're loud. They're louder than a normal acoustic guitar. So pre-electric guitar, you can get some volume happening. There's also kind of funny stories about how you can protect yourself with them. You can hit people over the head with them because they're made of metal. I think that would be very true if you're a street musician. But so they're important because they've got that, I'm going to use the term again, grit. They've got this, they've got a bark to them, They hit you in the face with the sound, they're like a acoustic electric guitar, so that was very important, I think. And artists like Son House and Booker White, in particular, came to the fore. Tampa Red, a lot of these musicians are playing metal guitars. Okay, the instruments that I use, that sort of varies, Rob. Like in the early days of Backsliders, I used all acoustic. I plugged them in though. But these days, I mainly play electric guitars. I started to, at one point, realise that all of my heroes, well, not all of them, but many of them who lived into the electric guitar period, like Fred McDowell, actually, most of the time they're playing electric instruments. You think of them as acoustic artists, but actually playing electric instruments, So I tend to play unusual guitars in general. I'm attracted to them. I like the sound. It's the sound that I want. So I play a lot of Taisco or Teisco guitars, Japanese from the 1960s. I've got a number of those. Supro guitars as well, American guitars generally from the 1960s, although they're reissued today. That's the sorts of things. I have some unusual 12-string guitars as well that I use live. But that's sort of, I'm like supranational Taisco land.
I gather you're an historian of the blues, which is great, and you love to impart knowledge to people too. I know you do lots of Q&As at festivals, and you've also lectured at universities, I believe, both here and international. Does that give you a buzz, getting the word out about the blues?
Yeah, I really like it. I mean, I wouldn't do it otherwise, actually, but I really do. I think it's so important for people to realize that, that the music that you're listening to, it's got a history. It's important to know the history. You need to build on, what you're doing now is not, it's not the be all and end all. It's not all new. You've got to look back. And that's why I just think it's super important, not only about the music itself, but the history of the artists and, how people lived or still live and the areas that people come from, how people interact, that sort of thing. I think all of those elements are just important to build a whole picture of what's going on. And even, okay, so you may not be particularly into blues, but if you listen to rock, well, guess what? It comes from blues. So you might as well listen as well. It's that sort of thing. I just think if you're going to be interested in something, find out a bit of background on it. And sure. So it's the steel's referring to the steel guitar, the lap slide guitar that's so common in Hawaiian music. Firstly, it came through Hawaiian music in terms of how we know it. And it's also the steel guitar in country music, that sort of thing. So that particular instrument, the actual Hawaiian version of it, 6-string guitar usually, could be 8 strings, but generally lays over your lap, you play slide on it. You mentioned the resonator guitar, the metal guitars. That was a similar thing. There was versions of that lay over your lap and play slide on it, sliding the notes. Well, within the House of God tradition, the House of God Church in the United States, in the South, and particular around Toledo, where Nikki and Gloria Brown come from, and Tamika, going back, must be roughly 70 years now, might be a bit longer. Little Willie Eason, a member of a church community, walked into a church one day, had his lap steel with him. How he got a lap steel, who knows? But he had one. And rather than typically playing the organ or the piano, which would be normal in a church of that type of church, he played this lap steel guitar. Now, the story goes that we don't know the true story, but whether the piano was broken or out of tune or there's some issue. But anyway, Willie decided he's going to save the day with this lap steel guitar. And it took off. People just kind of gravitated towards it. And the sound it's played differently. It's developed, obviously, over time. And it's developed into what we now know as sacred steel music, which is what, as I said, Derek Trucks gets a lot of influence from it, where the notes, slide guitar is always very vocal. It's like, it's mimicking the human voice in general, or atmospheric sounds. But in sacred steel, it's particularly vocal. If you can imagine a gospel singer singing in a church and the guitar's responding. So the voice, these, wonderful gospel voices, and then the slides responding. And so that's sacred steel music. So, artists like Robert Randolph, for example, Aubrey Ghent, who was actually a friend of Derek Trucks, these sorts of artists. And Nikki is from that community, knows all of these artists. And so I was lucky enough to be able to, I made contact with Nikki because I could see musically we would connect, I felt, and it actually ended up being correct. We did get together and play in Toledo, and it was like, this is, what we're trying to do is, I'm not trying to do sacred steel, she's not trying to do blues, we're trying to meld it into something else.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about the latest band, Dom Turner and the Rural Blues Project. I saw you guys the band play up at Broadbeach, and a couple of us from way out west agreed that it was the highlight of the festival. It was just fantastic.
Oh, great. Thank you, Rob.
How did the band come about? Tell us about who's in the band and what can we expect on Sunday, November the 6th at Way Out West when we get to see you.
Actually, really, really looking forward to come down to Way Out West and playing for you guys. That's for sure. It's this band I put together earlier this year. Backsliders have been off the road. Midnight Oil, we were talking about, they were on tour, so I had a lot of time. So it's something I've been wanting to do for a while, where I sort of really came from Leadbelly, thinking a lot about Leadbelly. Huddie Ledbetter wrote all of these great songs, but he didn't just do blues songs. He did lots of, he's referred to as a songster. So, he did country, did Zydeco, but they all have his own treatment to them. And, in Backsliders, we've been over the years at times taking songs and reworking them, but I thought I'd just put something together where we really just focus on that. I'm not writing any original songs for it. It's just, we're taking preferably earlier 20th century music, blues and occasional folk music, and they're trying to reinvent it in some way, completely reworking them, and turning a Robert Johnson song into a slightly funk or something, just trying to rework it. And the instrumentation is different than what you would expect, in that it's me on electric guitar, Roscoe Clark, the amazing drummer from the 4-Day Riders, on drums. Roscoe's just fabulous, and the third person, it's a floating third person, but more often than not, it's George Washing Machine, great violinist. So you might think violin's a bit unusual in this music form, but actually, there's a lot of early blues stuff. Muddy Waters' first album made violin on it, So we're kind of trying to drag that into the mix. And so, it's all very upbeat though. We tend to sort of, pump it along, it's very dancey. So we are recording, actually. Unfortunately, it's pretty well the week after we come back from Melbourne trip. So in November, we're recording, and we're going to get that out quite quickly. We want to get it out, we're hoping by the end of the year, but that's unlikely. But at worst case, early next year, we'll have an album out for sure. Yeah.
Cool. Fantastic. That's about all I've got for today, Dom. You and the band have been a long time partner of Way Out West. All those years ago, in our first year, you played in the back room. You gave us a chance, and we're so happy that we've become mates, and we just so enjoy your music, no matter what the band is. So safe travels, and we'll see you early next month, mate.
Thanks, Rob. It's always great to see you and to chat to you, and I'm looking forward to catching up for a few beers when we're down there.